we're live. All right. All right.
Really
We're
speed
live.
this up.
I know. I was going to say for the people who showed up first, they should go read your piece really quick. But now
I
that
can summarize it pretty quickly.
I'm going to ask you to. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Brian Beutler. I'm the writer and publisher of Off Message. I'm here today with the writer and civil rights lawyer and friend of mine, Will Stansel, who writes the newsletter Stansel Culture. We've both been thinking and posting and
Correct.
publishing. Yeah, no, but it's free, so whatever. Just go sign up for it.
Hey, go
We
check.
we've both been thinking and posting and publishing pieces about what Democrats should demand in exchange for their votes ahead of the September 30th deadline to fund the government in recent weeks. But then on Monday, the Supreme Court, 6 Republicans issued an interim ruling, which will effectively allow ICE agents and other federal agents to harass and detain people based on things like their language and their skin color until they can provide proof of legal status. So as of Monday, we're kind of in a papers, please country. And so
And I want to be clear because I'm going to have my attorney brains kicking in that there's no reason to assume that this case is limited to immigration enforcement. It's a Fourth Amendment case, so theoretically it legalizes racial profiling for everybody. It's just that obviously the context in which this arose was ICE, but
I think what you're saying is that if you were to be stopped today and like on some thin pretext they asked for proof of your citizenship or legal status and you didn't have it, that they could detain you.
No, I'm saying
and then you would have to like post facto litigate whether they had reasonable grounds to stop you based on your skin color or your like the language that you speak, which is
I'm talking about police stopping black people.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, I just want to
say more. I mean, because like how do you imagine?
They provided no reasoning here. Basically, it's a Fourth Amendment case. They provide no reasoning whatsoever for what would constitute reasonable suspicion, except for the Kavanaugh dissent or not dissent concurrence that says that races can be included as along with these other factors, which are all kind of several of which summarize to race as well. And so it seems like as if they're essentially saying racial profiling is okay. For at least brief detention in the course of law enforcement, which there's no reason that would necessarily be limited to ICE for immigration enforcement. Now,
so you think because there's no meat to the ruling, it's just this summary thing that other law enforcement agencies doing other kinds of enforcement are going to cite that as a basis for doing racial profiling.
If I was a law enforcement agent, I certainly would.
Well, you must be some kind of racist.
I mean, it's more alarming even than I think it's been covered. But obviously, in the immediate context, what's very alarming is this being used for these brutal, detentions, brief detentions, in the words of Brett Kavanaugh, where Latino Americans are ripped out of their cars, ripped out of their homes, thrown on the ground, detained. They don't have proof of citizenship. So.
Okay, so I mean, for our purposes, I think it doesn't matter if this is a terrible ruling or one of the worst rulings in the history of the Supreme Court. It is a racial profiling ruling.
Absolutely.
And it at least puts tens of millions of brown-skinned Latino immigrants and people who might look like at increased risk, and they got to carry around their passports or their green cards or whatever at all times. And they got to hope they don't encounter an ICE agent who will just pretend they didn't see, throw it in a trash can, whatever. So you wrote a piece because of this ruling, arguing that Democrats in Congress and the Senate should make reversing this decision their core demand in the shutdown fight that we're already kind of in the middle of. And so obviously, like I in principle agree with any effort to overturn this ruling. I think I have some doubts in practice as to how you want to insert this into the shutdown fight. But can you just give everyone like the nickel version of your piece, like why you think this works on both substance and politics in the context of the shutdown fight?
Sure. So I think in the shutdown fight, Democrats, there's been increasing appetite for some sort of fight over something. I mean, you see someone like Ezra Klein saying that if they don't fight, they should quit his leadership. But the question that keeps coming up is, how do you pick an issue that's winnable? How do you pick something conveyed to the public? How do you pick something that is, that essentially you can fight around? You could say, well, we're going to fight around reversing every single thing Donald Trump's ever done. But in practice, that's a difficult thing to fight on because A, you're never going to achieve it. B, it starts to seem unreasonable. C, you can't really capture it in a soundbite. And I would raise another objection to some of the things. So then you have people saying things, well, we should fight on restoring healthcare subsidies or some kitchen table thing, whatever. I don't care. Um, I think that those concerns don't really meet the moment. The problem with Donald Trump is not that he has got bad kitchen table economic policy. I mean, he certainly does, but that is not what makes his administration exceptional. It's not why I'd be willing to go fight through a prolonged shutdown fight. The problem with his administration is authoritarian. He's instituting this authoritarian regime. He's invading cities. He's instituting this campaign of racial terror against Latinos. He's turning ICE into a kind of an American secret police. These sort of issues, these fundamental democracy issues. So I would also insert the condition that the shutdown fight should be over a narrow issue that touches on these things. And finally, I would say that the shutdown fight should be something that you benefit from whether you win or lose. Because of any shutdown fight, you don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, Republicans are going to just refuse any kind of demands. It's very difficult to know how it plays out. So you don't want something where after it's done, you say, well, what did we gain? We didn't win the fight. The government's funded. We are now what? And so what I think is that this particular issue satisfies all these qualities in a way that almost nothing else does. It is very narrow. It is very simple. The principle you can capture in a sentence: Latino people shouldn't be detained for being Latino. It responds to something that is a recent development. So it's in topical in a way. You're not like looking back to something that happened 9 months ago and saying, okay, now suddenly we're going to stand our ground. This is something that happened like 2 days ago. So now it's an emergency. I think that it is something that is winnable. Is something that it's very easy to fix. You could fix this with a couple lines in a statute. ICE can't do this and this and this. That's all you would need. And even if you lose, the real kicker is even if you lose this, like let's say you fight this, the government shuts down, it goes on for 2 weeks. You attract all this attention. And it gets covered in the news as Democrats fight for to end Latino profiling. Republicans resist. Government shuts down, and then ultimately you lose. The law stays the same. Well, you raise all this attention to the fact that, first of all, the GOP is so married to the idea that Latinos should be discriminated against for being Latino that they are willing to shut down the government to preserve that principle. This is a vulnerable coalition for the GOP. Second, you've really shown that Democrats will go to the mat for these voters. And this is, the thing that people keep bringing up is Prop 187 in California, which is the ballot in the.
It was a ballot initiative in the 90s.
Yeah, where you would ban immigrants from receiving state benefits. There's tons of organizing around it. The problem is it passed, by a pretty large margin, actually. But what it did is it completely shifted the politics of California because it moved essentially the Latino population of California, which before that had been politically mixed, over to the Democratic side, and basically is why California became a deep blue state today. And so I think that Democrats should be looking for opportunities to demonstrate first of all the absolute commitment of the GOP to the racial terrorization of Latinos. I mean, it's fundamental to the ideology of Trump's strongest supporters. And second, their own willingness to defend Latinos from these kinds of fundamental civil rights violations.
I was a junior high school student in Southern California when Prop 187 passed, and there were walkouts in my junior high school. I mean, that's how they're seared into my mind, and that really was the breaking point between the state being hostile to immigrants and the state moving in a much different direction. Redlands, where I grew up, has like a large Mexican immigrant population, and during the Pete Wilson years around Prop 187. It was a lot like the whole country now, where everyone who was an immigrant lived in terror all the time, and like you could see it in the way they drove their cars, and just like they were so fastidious about not breaking any law, even by a single mile per hour, that it actually affected how people moved around the city, how traffic patterns work. And it was, everyone understood it's because we have this large population of people who can't play fast and loose with speeding laws and stuff like that. And I was a little too young to grasp the kind of terror of all that at the time, but it definitely seared its way in my brain. So I want to narrow the zone of disagreement here as much as I can, because I totally agree that your idea, unlike these sort of extraneous policy ideas, uh, fits the contours of a budget fight well. Because if you're talking about healthcare subsidies as like the thing that Democrats are going to demand, like it's not just that like those aren't civic emergencies. Like cutting Obamacare or cutting Medicaid, cutting rich people's taxes, letting Obamacare subsidies expire are like the most legitimate things this Republican trifecta has done in the last 9 months. They're horrible ideas and they're going to hurt people, but like they went through a normal legislative process or a reasonably normal legislative process.
You govern the country, you can make that decision.
Yes. And so the flip side of that is that if you force them to back down from some of that stuff, you actually insulate them from the political cost of imposing bad policy on tens of millions of people. And so like I don't think it's a weird non sequitur as to the constitutional crisis we're living through. And it's like a favor Republicans in some sense in that it limits the political damage that they're doing to themselves through just like normal policymaking channels. So we agree there. I think my concern, and like I support the goal of overturning the Supreme Court decision. I think my concern pertains to whether it makes sense to peg the whole stand that we're asking Democrats to take on a single concession, rather than you start with a broader principle and then you include several different demands underneath that, right? So like in the pieces I've written about this, I think I've kind of struggled to make the point that Democrats should be making demands that are pertinent to the annual budget fight, and that these demands should advance the basic goal of assuring that Trump doesn't violate whatever agreement they strike or use the funds appropriated to break the law, right? And the main goal should be to like force Trump a few inches closer to like normal constitutional governance. And that this would help break his dictatorial streak. Everyone would see him weaken. Democrats would like feel a little bit more galvanized to fight more. And like, I think that your idea fits perfectly on any list like that. Um, like the danger in making one demand is that there's like, if Republicans reject it, you end up in a shutdown fight, and then the standoff lasts however long it lasts, and then it's binary, you either win or lose. If you start with a list, and that can include your suggestion. It can include no masks on ICE agents. It can include defunding National Guard deployments into cities, things like that. Is that it's a basis for negotiation to get to the goal of pushing Trump back a bit. And maybe you don't get everything, and maybe even your idea falls out in the course of that negotiation. But at least like progress is made in that Trump takes an L, which I think is like a very important thing to have happen.
They're not going to do that. Like, they're just not.
Democrats are not going to do that?
They're not going to do that. I mean, clearly they're not going to do that. They're already trying.
It's not too late. I'm not sure.
I agree. It's not too late, but I just don't think they're going to do that. And again, your idea is better. And if you were in charge, we'd be in a much better place in the country. But like, I just don't think they're going to do that. And I don't think there's any way to force them to do that. And I think if you present them with a complicated plan, they're going to say, oh, you don't understand. You are so silly, Brian. You think anything can be done, but you don't understand the realities of politics in DC and kitchen table voters and blah, blah, blah. I think that ultimately, one of the things we have to be thinking about is, what can we make them do? What can we force onto them that they can't say no to? And I think that one of the things, so the part of the reason this idea really jumps out at me is not that I think this is the absolute best plan. That, if I was God knows if I was a Democratic senator, I'd say I'm not voting for anything until, you impeach Donald Trump and have him tried for treason against the Constitution. But I'm not a Democratic senator. So what I can say is, what I think about is, what can I demand of Democratic senators that they're going to have a really hard time saying that I can't ask for this. And this, to me, is asking for an end to this very simple fix. This very simple fix that Congress can undeniably do to end racial profiling, to end to try and reduce the harms that are just happening every single day, every hour of every day in Latino communities, where ICE is going in and brutalizing these communities. Like, if I'm a Democratic senator, how do I say no? I'm not going to do that. I think to me this is something that
It sounds to me like we disagree about the feasibility of getting Democrats to switch tacks from going, we're going to make a healthcare demand, to making a to making a democracy demand.
I would.
Um,
I think if you get a lot, I think if you get million people saying, calling their senators and saying, ask for this thing, this one silly, not silly, but this one tiny thing. Why are you being silly and not won't ask for anything? Just this one thing, this one tiny thing. Then it's that's a more that's a sharper point than saying ask for everything.
so we're probably not gonna like come to terms on this because I think that once you get them off the idea that like it is okay to make these extraneous demands for things like healthcare subsidies, right? Which is like the track they're on now. Like you can run that scenario forward, and it's either Republicans are going to accept the demand, and then Democrats will have saved Republicans from their own terrible healthcare policy, or Republicans are going to reject the demand, and they're going to say Democrats are shutting down the government for something that doesn't even have anything to do with the budget fight, right? Like these healthcare subsidies are a completely different set of laws, and like we'll deal with them separately, and for the time being, stop taking the government hostage and reopen it, right? And I think that that's a very predictable like fork in the road that we're going to reach if Democrats don't switch paths, right? If they switch paths and realize we need to make demands that are germane about this negotiation, are they even going to honor the budget agreement that they're asking for our votes for? Is Trump going to take this money and use it to break the law? Anything in that under that heading I think makes coherent sense to where if the government shuts down, Democrats can go to us, but also to like, you know, idiots in the mainstream media and be like, "Well, this is not like Ted Cruz shutting down the government to defund Obamacare. It's not like Newt Gingrich shutting down the government for tax cuts. This is just they're asking for our votes and then to stab us in the back and not honor the agreement, to take the money, break the law, and we can't give our votes for that. And these are the concessions that they could give us that would give us some assurance that they were going to honor the agreement. And I think your piece of it is like it could be three things. So your thing is one thing. You could add a second. You could add a third. And like they should be itemized like that and be reducible to like a few lines of legislative text, just like yours. But the more you present them with, the more grounds you have to negotiate down, just like in any kind of high stakes negotiation, like make a strong opening bid so that you walk away with something. And I think that if Democrats make the switch from like, we're not going to do extraneous demands, we're going to do germane demands, then they can start with more asks and walk away with something. And I don't know if that something would be the thing that you want, but it could be. And if it's not, then it's still a live issue. Democrats can say, we are trying to get Republicans to stop racially profiling Latinos. We didn't get it this round, but we're going to keep fighting for it. And then that like keeps the issue alive as a wedge, where Republicans like will eventually wake up to the fact that they're Prop 187ing themselves and they're only in power now because they managed to persuade enough Latinos that they aren't actually this racist anti-Latino party. And so I just think like the key is ratchet Democrats off the course they're on, and then like a world of possibilities open that it's a little less clear than just like here's our one demand, take it or leave it, but puts them in a stronger negotiating position.
I have no problem with Democrats. Obviously, I prefer them to come in with a broad list of things.
Mhm.
It's going to have to collapse at something, because that's how it's going to get described in the news. And it's very simple to say we are fighting until the GOP agrees to stop detaining Latinos for the crime of being Latino. Stuff full stop. That is the sentence that I would want to be at the top of the news for 3 weeks while everyone's wondering while the government shut down. And I part of this is I'm not optimistic about getting much out of this. We don't. Frankly, I don't have a lot of confidence in the Senate Democrats not to just eventually cave. But if we're going to have a fight, that is what I want people to. That is the fight that I want to see people to see us losing. I think there's a fight that captures the authoritarianism of this regime. I think it captures what the core of what Trump's about, which is racial terror and the restoration of racial caste. And I think that it captures the exceptional nature of Trump's presidency. And I think it splits the GOP coalition in a way that is absolutely deadly to them.
So this is like a good way to segue to like topic two, because the thing I like really do like about homing in on this one thing, is that it gives the lie to a genre of Democratic Party analysis that says anything that pertains to immigration or crime is necessarily bad politics for us. Because I think that as you've laid it out, it's unobjectionable that this is an issue that pertains to immigration that would be really harmful to Republicans, like much more harmful than some antiseptic issue like expanded or enhanced Obamacare subsidies, right?
Yeah.
Because if Democrats can wipe out half the gains that Republicans have made with Latinos, it's kind of lights out for them. Like Democrats will win elections.
Forever.
And yet the kinds of people, the Democratic leaders, their instincts, the people they listen to, all exist in this ecosystem that tells them, don't ever do that. Like, don't think that way. Just look at the numbers. And like, so I want to jam a bit about one of our like related shared bugbears, which is like Democratic leadership's instinct or determination to avoid those kinds of fight and try to yoke everything back to things they know always poll super well in focus groups and message. Yeah, it's we've been on this now since 2018.
7 years. Yeah, I've been running about this person in 2018.
We tell people how we
we should do it.
Got to know each other. Like it was over. It was 2018, and
all the time I was right about this. No one's ever listened.
I know it's a lonely road. So I think, in fact, I know that politicians in Washington and their flacks and everyone around them who isn't in the polling business, basically, they're like fairly innumerate. Like you don't typically there are exceptions, but you don't typically excel as a math student in high school or college and then go on to politics. It's like not super common.
It's very rare. Even the consultant, well, you'll probably say this, but one of the things that this means is even the consultants in politics are not that good at math.
Yeah,
you don't have to be good at math. You just have to be better than the people that are hiring you.
I was once actually very good at math because I studied physics in college, and then I switched. It was the Iraq War that captured my attention. I got really hooked on the journalism about the Iraq War, and I decided I want to be a journalist. One thing I know, and I feel a little bad talking about this, but like the people in my major and in the math major and the astro major who were really good at math, they went on to do that stuff. And the people who were less good, like me, went on to do politics or whatever, they switched. And it's obvious when you lay it out that way, but that means that the people who are good at math and politics aren't typically actually like savants. And then the second point is that the kind of math you need to do to understand public opinion is actually not college or graduate level math.
Well, the other thing, I mean, I have a different path. I was always very good at math, but I was just never that interested in doing math. I was much more interested in history, and I ended up being a lawyer. But I do have a policy degree, so I went to a policy school, and in policy school, you have a lot of people coming in who are going to go into politics, who can go into policy, and they are coming in. There's some math in there. And they come in and they are so bad at it. I mean, I literally had I remember this is a moment where this was a striking moment for me. There's a point I looked around my statistics class in policy school, and all these people who are now embedded in government all over Minnesota were copying off my test as I was taking it because they couldn't. This was literally statistics 101. It was like, what is the probability of rolling 2 6s on with you that roll the die? And it was like, I'm thinking, these people this is just not, they are not math people. They're just not, they're not good at this. And so it's like, it's fine. But what's interesting about it is that they're very impressed by people who can do fairly rudimentary math.
This is okay. So this is I think an underappreciated source of Democratic strategy, always leading them to the same conclusion. One is that I think they want to reach that conclusion, is that if they can just yoke everything to healthcare, they'll feel like they're on safe ground. They don't have to be very confrontational with Republicans, and they kind of know what to say without having to, because defending people's healthcare is actually fairly trivial. You come across looking really good when you do it, right? So they want to get there, but I also think that it's not just that they're like, we need to get there. Let's find the pollsters and the quants who are going to tell us that that's the right way to get there, they actually think, isn't it incredible that the thing that we want to talk about is also the thing that polls best, right? And they're so easily intimidated and impressed by people who have any facility with numbers, that that when the message test comes back and it's like, oh, once again, healthcare does great. They don't realize that they're just doing this kind of confirmation bias thing. And
Well,
they don't.
they hire the consultants to tell them. I mean, they get to pick who they're hiring. They get to pick who to listen to.
But I think
There's
that
this.
but I also think that they think that, I don't think that they do that with the intention of like we need to get the number back that justifies what we've already decided to do. I think that
It's confirmation bias.
yeah, they project that they're scared to go in any other direction, and the people who they pay realize, if I confirm that bias, they're going to be like, "Wow, it's such great news." I get to
I mean,
talk about
there's
the issue that I
two groups of
want.
people here. There's people that are politicians. And so I've run for office. I mean, I understand this. There are topics that you feel very comfortable talking about. And there's topics that are difficult to talk about because you
Mhm.
know that some people are going to get mad at you about, and that are, there's more conflict involved. And so you are drawn towards the things you are comfortable talking about. I certainly was not immune to this when I ran for office. There was like, if you wanted to talk about school policy, my God, I would just talk your ear off. But then if there's issues that, kind of split my neighborhood, split my potential constituents, and I was like, oh, don't want to avoid those,
Mhm.
someone like yell at me. So I get that. They have this pressure. On the other hand, you have a group of people that are trying to sell their consulting analytic services to Democrats. And so, it's hard to know exactly the degree of coordination here, and for different people, it's probably different. But there's definitely overall a dynamic where these people are most inclined to hire the people that are going to, sort of tell them the things that make them more comfortable, even if it's just subconscious. And these people understand that they're more likely to get hired if they say the sort of things that they know these people want to hear. And
Right.
so, over time, you get this kind of consensus that has become very difficult to break, that healthcare, the thing that we are most comfortable talking about, the thing we have 20 years of experience talking about, the thing we talk about every single election, or jobs, which we talk about every single election. That is the thing that will transform the electorate and win us every election, even though we do it every election and we don't win every election.
So I want to take this dynamic that you just described one step further, which is that, like, you have this dynamic that reinforces the things Democrats already want to do, and it's based on them hearing that, hey, the math supports your sort of prefigured plans, right? It's it would be it'd be like maybe more straightforward if there was a way to say, look, this math is wrong. But I think that in the abstract, the math is right. It's very simple math. There are a few ways Democrats assign pollsters and other consultants to go make these findings, right? It's like there's focus groups and there's message tests and there's like broad sample surveys. And in those contexts, they're getting data back, they're analyzing the data, and the data is in fact saying that when you ask people in those settings what is their greatest concern, what do you wish politicians would focus on, blah 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 blah, they're getting these antiseptic answers, cost of
Right.
living, healthcare,
Absolutely.
right? And so you can't actually attack the math, which is in a way it's good, but then it leads us to, so like, why does this approach keep failing us? And it's like the thing that I've kind of like struggled to impress on people who I'm having a hard time reaching with this critique is that it's the experiment design, is like it's garbage in, garbage out, kind of, that if you are trying to figure out what is going to impress like millions of people by asking individuals like which of these two messages or which of these two ideas resonates best with you, you're you're designing an experiment that bears no resemblance to how opinion is formed in the real world. Um, and um, and I think that what's happening right now, and the difficulty you and I are having trying to get Democrats to move off of healthcare subsidies in the government shutdown fight to something more related to the constitutional crisis, is that, like, it's they are going to their quants, and the quants are saying your best issue is healthcare, so try to raise the salience of healthcare in this fight. And but they're not thinking ahead to like, okay, so how is that going to interact with the way people respond in the real world? So Republicans have us over a barrel. We come out with our response. Our response is, but what about healthcare? And we think this is supposed to mechanically make people like us because that's what the lab results said. But in reality, people hear that and it's like, wait, that's a non sequitur. Or you're clearly trying to avoid like what's actually happening in the world. And so like right now, House Democrats are livid at Senate Democrats for following the quant advice. Like there was a meeting yesterday and they were told that like Senate Democrats are close to a deal along these lines. And they erupted. And so now you've split the Democratic caucus and people like you and me are like, this is bullshit. It's evasive nonsense. Republicans, they smell weakness because they see that Democrats are divided about all this and they pounce and they say, Democrats need to stop hemming and hawing and just fund the government. And people in the media also get it. And they're like, are Democrats going to like start holding government funding hostage for issues like healthcare? And suddenly this idea that works really well when you ask Jane Doe in a lab environment what she wishes this was about, like fails on first contact with the real world. And I think that like when you think about how the quantitative methods results might play out when you drop it into the chaotic world of public opinion, it becomes easier to understand why this whole approach to parliamentary decision making is like it's like based on it's like you would flunk a college class on experiment design if you presented this as a way to like test public opinion, figure out what is persuasive, and advise a political party.
Is that political scientists, when you go to a political scientist and you say, hey, how do I persuade a large portion of the public to agree with a particular idea? They're not going to say, oh no, we have it down. You take polls, you find out what issue they care about most, and then you put out ads about that issue. They're going to say it's really complicated. Give me $20 million and 20 years of research, and maybe I can give you a partial answer. And so these are and I think that for me is the thing that Democrats cannot accept because they're quant brain, because they're impressed by the math, but is fundamentally true and is holding them back. The question of how public opinion forms and how it affects vote choice and how political coalitions form is incredibly complicated. You're talking about a system made up of incredibly complicated individuals in the millions, all interacting with each other in incredibly complicated ways. Those interactions with each other are the complicated part. It's not the part where, you look around your life and you say, oh, my income went up, my income went down. Oh, I have a job, I don't. That stuff is relatively easy to measure and see. The stuff that is really hard to measure and see is what you are hearing from other people, what you're hearing from the news, your interactions with the rest of society. But that undoubtedly shapes most or maybe all of what you believe about politics.
I think about what you're describing is like, if I wanted to convince my uncle that his support for Donald Trump is wrong.
Yeah, I said this on Twitter or Blue Sky the other day.
Okay, I didn't
change his. Oh yeah, no, yeah, but I'm saying I know what you're going to go in. You don't show him evidence. You change his media diet probably.
Well, no, so I wanted to draw a distinction between like how persuasion might work in an extremely confined context between small numbers of people who trust each other, right? And so if I appealed to my uncle and I said, I think it's like harmful that you did this and like here's X, Y, Z. Like I think that the things that come out of the Democratic quant world might actually be useful in a context like that. How do you persuade somebody that you trust that their political decisions are wrong or have been harmful or would be better if they changed, right? The way persuasion works on a mass scale is more like, you're at a concert with a band that you're kind of on or that you've never even heard before, but then you get into the crowd and the vibe is great and everyone's dancing and suddenly now you get it. Oh, this music is actually really, I would like Taylor Swift has made millions of fans this way. People who thought, oh, this is like bubblegum pop that I'm not into because
Have you been to
I'm
see a
cool.
Taylor Swift concert,
I
Brian?
have not. I have not. But like I have gone from
I did.
being like boo to being like, okay, if like she comes to Washington and I can get a ticket, I'll probably go. Um,
You should.
no, I know, and but it's
But
but like I've been pulled along by like the incredible consensus that like from that I'm hearing from people who I wouldn't expect to hear this from, that like she's a much better artist than your biases about corporate pop would make you think.
well, let me talk
And
about my uncle too,
okay, go ahead.
which dovetails all of it. If I
Okay.
wanted to persuade my uncle of something that Donald Trump had lied about Jeffrey Epstein, for instance, uh, I could do that. I could sit down with him for 4 hours. I could show him all this stuff, and I could probably corner him to a point where he had to admit that, okay, yeah, Donald Trump probably was friends with the notorious sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, and yeah, that's pretty bad. Within 1 week, that would be gone from his brain.
Yeah, yeah. Because he'd
Because
be
what
back to
happens is he
Fox.
goes out into the world, and all the social interactions that he has that have given him this belief would still be there. And that is where he is drawing his views. It's not that he sits down and reasons them out. I mean, no offense to my uncle, well, maybe a little bit of offense to my uncle. He's a character, but it's that he is surrounded by social networks that reinforce this constantly. And the problem is that even modeling the decision making process of my uncle would require a political science department, you know, like tenured faculty and millions of dollars. But we have these Democratic consultants. They come along and you give them $400,000, and they're like, "We've modeled the entire U.S. electorate, and we know the thing you can say that will persuade them." No, you don't. You don't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You don't. No one knows that. And
So
what I would say. Let me finish this. What
yeah,
I
sure.
would say is that what is a better approach even, and has always been the approach in politics, is that some of this you can sort of intuitively feel out. I mean, politicians, the art of politics, it's an art. It's not a science. Politicians understand the art of mass persuasion. They can feel the crowd. They
Mhm.
can feel how a public opinion is shifting. But what Democrats have done is, to some extent, we've promoted people who don't have that capacity. They're like Hakeem Jeffries, who just came up through a political machine, has never had to do this his entire life, doesn't seem to understand this exists. And sometimes you have people who are pretty good at this, but then you have they get in touch with the consultant class and all of their fellow Democratic politicians that tell them this, and that instinct just gets cauterized. They stop doing that, and they're like, well, the polls tell me I should talk about healthcare, and so it seems like I should. And it's like it's like we just don't have the capacity to model society, to model public opinion on that level with the math we've got. Certainly not with the consultants we have and their like medium level ability at it. And so we'd be better off going with the intuitive style of politics, where it's like, this feels right. This feels like something people will get up in arms about over time, but we can fire people up about. But we won't do it.
So I mean, what you're saying and what I would like I need to think about how to phrase this so that it's clear. But like, there's a paradox here, and we're living it because like I am struggling with how to persuade a small population of elite Democrats that they're going about their decision making wrong, that they've picked bad experiment designs, and that they should think about crowds rather than these like laboratory experiments. And I always run into a brick wall where they are just like, they end up mesmerized by the charts and the math. At the same time, what's literally happening right now is that the same population of Democrats is doing a rethink because Ezra Klein wrote a New York Times column, which is an example of how you're saying it should work. Is that suddenly this guy that they respect a lot, who has a very large audience, has said that their approach is wrong, and actually, if they keep going down it, they might need to get new leaders. And nothing about the lab results have changed, right? Like the if you go run those experiments again today, they're going to spit out the same results today. But there's a new idea in their head, and it's because a like a figure of significance changed the way the crowd felt about how they should proceed. And so like can you think of a way to like marshal what is actually happening right now? How Democrats are finding themselves persuaded by an idea rather than by a quantitative analysis, and say, see, look, it's happening to you right now as we speak. And yet you're going to ignore this sensation, and you're going to go back to doing things the way you always do them. but
No,
like it's
I
happening.
don't think.
But
I think that
it's
I
happening like
think
right
you're
before our
correct. I think you're
eyes.
correct about what's happening. I think